I did not let them touch. I want to be precise about the sequence because the order matters. The second key was on the table. My key was in the jacket pocket on the back of the chair. The pocket was moving, the fabric pulling forward slightly, the way a magnet pulls at a cloth laid over it. I could see the shape of the key pressing through. I had perhaps 3 seconds between recognizing what was happening and making a decision. I took the jacket off the chair and held it away from the table. The movement stopped, not gradually, immediately. The pocket went still. The second key on the table was also still now, and I am not certain whether it stopped when I moved the jacket or whether it had already stopped and I was reacting to a motion that had already completed. I cannot reconstruct that sequence accurately. I was not watching both things simultaneously. What I can say is that when I held the jacket away from the table with my key inside it, the second frequency beneath the device tone dropped, did not disappear, dropped. The primary tone held direction toward the inventory page. The secondary frequency went from almost below hearing to below hearing entirely. Still present, the way a very low note is still present in a room after the instrument stops, an absence with residue. Hannah noticed the change before I said anything. She had been watching from the starboard side of the table, very still, not interfering. When the secondary frequency dropped, she exhaled. Not relief, something more controlled than that, like she had been holding a measurement and could now record the result. She said, "It responded to distance." I said I knew. I was still holding the jacket. Marin Souls was in the passageway doorway. I did not know she was there until she spoke. She said, "Set the jacket on the deck, not near the table." I did. The secondary frequency did not return. The primary tone held. I'm recording this approximately 40 minutes after that sequence. The jacket is on the deck near the galley entrance. The second key is back on the chart table next to the photograph. My key is in the jacket pocket on the deck and I have not retrieved it. The device is active. The inventory page has not been touched. The objective today is to understand what just happened well enough to decide what to do next. I start with what I can measure. The secondary frequency appeared when both keys were within approximately 1 meter of each other. The table distance plus the chair distance puts them at roughly 80 centimeters when the motion started. I did not notice the frequency at greater distance. I noticed the key movement first and the frequency second, which means either the frequency began at the moment of movement or it began earlier, and I missed it because I was focused on the photograph. The latter is more likely. I was using the loop. I was not monitoring the device closely. The frequency may have been building for some time before I registered it. I tell Hannah this. She nods and writes something on the corner of her chart paper. Not a formal note, just a notation she is making for herself. She says, "The device changed before the key moved." I ask her to be specific. She says, "I was watching the device when the secondary frequency started. The key moved after. Not much after, a few seconds, but the device registered something first." That is important, and I write it down. Device response preceded physical movement, which means the device was reading something that existed before the physical interaction. A condition, a potential, a relationship between the objects that the device could detect before the objects themselves acted on it. This fits the mechanic we have documented across the entire investigation. The device reads what is present in the system before the system makes that presence physically manifest. It detected the narrator's listener status before the archive formally registered it. It tracked the direction of the accumulation site before we had a map. Precedence is consistent behavior for this instrument. What is new is the direction. The device has pointed at locations, at investigators, at documents. It has not previously shown a response to the relationship between two objects. Whatever it detected between the keys is a category of information it has not demonstrated before. I look at both keys, the second key on the table, my key in the jacket on the deck, same origin, same manufacturer, same wear pattern. Separated at some point, O'Connor's notation returned it. The 1931 inventory accounting for one key, while the other was already at the primary grid, and now in the same room for the first time in how long? Decades, at minimum, possibly longer. I write, objects with shared origin history separated and reintroduced. Device detects the relationship. Physical response follows. Hannah has the watch number 1 photograph and my watch side by side. She is doing what I did earlier, comparing wear, comparing engraving position, but she is looking at something specific, working toward a question rather than an observation. She says, without looking up, put watch number 2 near the photograph. I pick up my watch from the table and move it toward the photograph. The device tone does not change. Hannah says, closer. I move the watch until it is touching the edge of the photograph's surface. The tone is unchanged. The secondary frequency does not return. She says, now, move it over the image, over the watch in the image. I do. My watch, face down, over the image of watch number 1 in the pre-registry record. Overlapping. The secondary frequency returns, faint, lower than before, but present. I hold very still and do not speak. Hannah says, now take it away. I lift my watch. The secondary frequency drops again. She sits back. She is looking at the photograph without touching it, working something through before she says it. She says, the device is reading something between the photograph and the watch, not between two physical objects, between a physical object and a record of the same object. I think about that. Watch number 1 in the image, watch number 2 in my hand, different objects, but both marked with the same crescent, the same numbering system, the same manufacturer. If the device reads contact signatures, history of physical contact, traces of the people who have handled something, then watch number 1 and watch 2 have a shared signature history. Not because they were touched by the same people, because they were made in the same context for the same purpose, by whoever built this system before the archive existed to catalog it. The relationship is not identity, it is lineage. I say this to Hannah. She considers it, looking at the photograph, and says, or inheritance. The second watch didn't just share a context with the first. It was built to continue something the first one started. I write both framings down without deciding between them. Lineage and inheritance are different implications, and I do not have enough information to choose. Marin Souls is sitting at the far end of the chart table. She has been there since the jacket incident. She has not spoken. I am aware that she registered something when the secondary frequency returned, a slight change in her posture, a stillness that was different from her ordinary stillness. She is not surprised by what is happening. She is watching us work towards something she has partial knowledge of, and she is doing what she always does, not helping, not interfering, observing whether we arrive at the right thing on our own. I ask her, have you seen this before? Object to record response. She says, once. I wait. She says, I didn't finish the experiment. She looks at the photograph. I should have. That is all she gives. I do not push. She has established over 3 days aboard this vessel that pressure does not produce more information from her. It produces silence. The single sentence is more than she would have said an hour ago. I return to the second key. If the device detects relationships between objects, lineage, shared origin, contact history, then the second key and key 47 in the jacket on the deck produced a stronger response than watch number 2 in the watch 1 photograph. Significantly stronger. The key movement was physical. The watch photograph response was tonal only. Same class of relationship, different magnitude. I think about why. The watches have the same manufacturer, the same marking system, the same wear pattern at different stages. But they were numbered differently. 1 and 2, a sequence. They were not made as a pair. They were made as part of a series. The keys, according to Hannah's observation at the beginning of this investigation, were made together, not sequential, simultaneous. A pair cut from the same blank, issued together, intended to be used together. The paired objects have a stronger response than the sequential objects. I write this down and underline it. Hannah, who has been reading my notes from across the table, a habit we have both developed, reading each other's working notes without comment, says the keys were made to be held by two people at the same time. I say, yes, that is what we established. She says, so the response isn't just recognizing a relationship, it's recognizing an incomplete condition. I stop writing. She says it again, slowly. They're not just responding to each other. They're responding to the fact that they're not being used the way they were built to be used. The system is registering an absence. Two objects designed for simultaneous use, separated for decades, brought back into proximity. The device isn't detecting resonance, it's detecting incompletion. I do not immediately agree or disagree with this because it is a significant interpretive step, and I need to sit with it before I accept it as a working conclusion. But I cannot immediately find a counter-argument. The behavior fits. The keys were made as a pair. The pair was separated. One went to me, one went to the accumulation site drawer. The device, which detects listener presence and contact signatures and conditions rather than simple physical properties, is registering that these two objects exist in a state that does not match their designed function. They have been incomplete since they were separated. Whatever door they were made to open together, they have not opened it as a pair. I write, device reading, designed condition versus actual state, not proximity response, function gap detection. Marisol says from the end of the table, don't let them touch yet. Not urgently, procedurally. The way she said, don't touch it yet, about the inventory page. I tell her I had already decided that. She says, I know. I'm saying it because the reason matters, not just the decision. She looks at the photograph of watch number 1 on the table, not at me. When paired objects in this system make contact after a long separation, the system registers the reunion. That registration is not neutral. I ask what that means practically. She says, it means the system records who was present when the contact happened. Everyone in the room becomes part of the event. She pauses. That has implications for the investigation that you need to understand before you let it happen. Hannah says, what kind of implications? Marin says, the kind that change what the system knows about you. Then she stops. That is the boundary. She has given us the procedural warning. She will not go further than the warning. I have learned to accept that as the complete information rather than a partial answer requiring extraction. I sit with what she said. The system records who is present at significant events. We have documented that behavior, the accumulation site's record book writing in real time, the investigator cards updating when investigators arrived, the rook node acknowledging contact through signal change. The system is always watching. When something significant occurs, it logs the witnesses. If the keys touching constitutes a significant event, and the magnitude of the artifact response suggests it does, then allowing it to happen in this room with these 3 people present will change what the archive knows about all of us, what classification it assigns, what status it updates, what record it writes. We would not be observers of the event. We would be participants in it. I am not certain that is wrong. I am not certain the investigation can continue without it eventually happening. But I understand now why Marin's warning is about timing rather than prohibition. Not don't do this. Do this when you understand what it means. I put the second key back in the canvas bag. I take the jacket from the galley entrance and put it back on the chair, key 47 still in the pocket. The secondary frequency does not return. The device holds its primary tone toward the inventory page. Hannah is looking at the watch number 1 photograph again. Not the watch, the background. The stone surface, the title shelf symbol, the evidence of an actively maintained marking site. She has the nautical chart open beside it, and this time she is comparing them openly, not folding the chart away when she finds something. She says, I want to show you something. She lays the nautical chart flat, and puts the photograph beside it. On the chart, she has made 3 pencil marks, light, precise, the kind she makes when she has been working a geometry problem over several sessions. The marks form a triangle. One point is labeled with the coordinates of the tidal shelf below the headland. One point is unlabeled, the second station NW of Rook that has been on her chart since Season 2 with no identification. The third point is a coastal location I do not immediately recognize. She says the symbol in the photograph background, the cut angle, the height from the base of the stone. She traces the triangle with one finger. I've been trying to locate the site for 2 days. If the marking technique is consistent across all instances of this symbol system, same tool, same height, same cut, then the site in the photograph is here. She taps the third point on the triangle. It is a coastal headland approximately 40 kilometers northeast of our current position. I look at the point. I look at the second key in the canvas bag. I look at the inventory page with its redacted name and the device still pointed at it. Hannah says, "It's accessible by water. We could be there in 4 hours." I do not answer immediately. I am thinking about Marin's warning, about what the system records when paired objects make contact, about the fact that the keys have not yet been used as a pair, have not opened whatever door they were made to open together, and that whatever that door leads to may be at the site in Hannah's triangle. I reach for the canvas bag with the second key. Marin Sol stands up from the end of the table for the first time since the jacket incident. She does not move toward the bag. She moves to the chart and looks at the third point Hannah has marked. Her expression does not change, but she stops moving. Hannah watches her. I watch her. Nobody speaks. Then Marin says very quietly, "That's not on any archive map I've seen." The device tone shifts. Not direction, not frequency. The quality of it, that denser, more focused characteristic from last night, the one I had no word for. It has returned, and it is not pointing at the inventory page anymore. It is pointing at the chart, at the third point, at the location 40 kilometers northeast that does not appear on any archive map Marin has seen, which means it predates the archive's cataloging of this coastline, which means it belongs to the older system, the one the archive grew around, the one that made the keys and the watches and the marks on the tidal shelf that the archive has been translating for centuries without knowing the language it was reading. Hannah has already begun folding the chart into navigation format. I pick up the canvas bag. From the passageway, the Morwena's radio crackles once, a burst of static, no signal, no voice, and goes silent.